Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Shakespeare and Company for this, our second collaboration with NYU in 2018. And we're delighted to see so many of you turn out for poetry reading. It's very heartening. Rare as well. So tonight we have two people who are very special to the bookshop. We've collaborated with over many years, Deborah Landau and John Freeman. I'll introduce both of them individually before they read, but before then, if you just join me in welcoming both Deborah and John to Shakespeare and Company. So first up tonight, Deborah Landau. While her work has been compared to Dorothy Parker, Sylvia Plath, and even Allen Ginsberg, so distinct, so alive with wit and linguistic inventiveness is Deborah Landau's poetry that it's possible in the future her name will become a touchstone to which other poets are compared, if it isn't already the case. Whether in her debut collection, Orchidelirium, or The Last Usable Hours, her luminous hymn to the urban witching hour, or most recently, The Uses of the Body, which was featured on NPR's All Things Considered, including on Best of 2015 lists by The New Yorker, Vogue, BuzzFeed, and the Oprah Magazine, and which The New Yorker compared to weaponized vers de société. Deborah's determination not just to explore womanhood, laying bare its beauty, its tenderness, and its ferocity, but also to confront the reality that, quote, we are here and soon won't be, has resulted in a body of work that feels increasingly relevant and increasingly important. Deborah's poems have also appeared in The New Yorker, The Paris Review, Poetry, The New York Times, and The Best American Poetry. And in 2016, she received a Guggenheim Fellowship. As many of you are well aware, she teaches in and directs the creative writing program at New York University. And I believe tonight we'll be treated to several poems from Deborah's forthcoming book, Soft Targets, which will be published in 2019. Please join me in welcoming Deborah Landau to Shakespeare and Company.
Thanks, Adam. That was really nice. Thanks to David and Sylvia for hosting us here for a decade. This is such an enchanting place, and it's always an incredible privilege and honor to stand here in this room. And thanks mostly, actually, to John for inviting me to read with him. We're here to celebrate John's book of poetry, Maps. And John is one of the most extravagantly multi-talented people I've ever met. Who knew that in addition to the writing, his criticism, his book reviewing, his editing, and his teaching, he could also write a magnificent book of poems. So thank you, John, for inviting me to be with you. So I'm going to read only new poems, and this is from my forthcoming book, Soft Targets. I started writing these poems almost exactly 2 years ago when we were here during the Charlie Hebdo attacks. Then we were back just after the Bataclan, and then we were here during the Nice attack. So the pressure built, as many of you know. So it's really a book-length poem, and I'm going to read straight through, not the whole book, but straight through a sampling. They're little vignettes, and it's about 14 minutes, and that's it. Soft Targets. When it comes to this fleshed neck, even a finger could do it. Even a sharp stick, a blunt blow, a fall. My jugular, there's a soft target. And night's a soft target, all of us within it. Osama shot dead in his pajamas. And everyone on the Brooklyn-bound F as the man removes a bomb from his bag, a square of chocolate he detonates in his mouth. There were real officers in the street, but they were doing it wrong. One winked at me. Another was purely conceptual. One thought to himself as I walked by, you little bitch. Bulge knobs of their guns made them oral, made them real big machismo, even the skinny ones, even the abstract. A certain beauty in the duty of it, absence of pleasantries, cold and uniformed. Meanwhile, he was broken, she was concussed. And we returned home gilded with what? Safety? In advance of danger, animals agitate. When the time comes, all this will be only shouts and disturbance. A breath leaves the body and wishes it could return, maybe. The news to the left and right, rich with failure, terror, dither. The bloated moon in constant charge of us as vapor. And this did frame our constituency, even in our cozy homes, even in a painless state on the downriver, oh, oblivion, sipping champagne, as another night brings forth, dancing its big plan, its damage. I had a thought, but it turned autumn, turned cold. I had a body, unwearied, vital, despite the funeral in everything. Ample with bodies, covered in graves and gardens, potholes and water, an ardent river we walked together, a wine and rising breeze. Much trouble at hand, yet the lilies still. That summer we sat with our backs to the street, letting time pass, lying all afternoon in the grass as if green and insect were the world. I am, and you are, we wrote, until the paper seemed a tree again, and we walked beneath it, greener and unsullied, afresh. Golden we were in the moment of conception, and alive, as if we always would be. Massive powers that be, what will be? We smoke our pipes to forget you. And mildly now we bide our time, the violence and real cities under siege, but also filled this morning with coffee drinkers, office workers, taxi drivers, boys on bikes. In July it was that we came to rest on the riverbanks, finding a bloodlight flooding what we'd gone to see. Eros, Eros. In Paris, we stayed all night in a seraphic cocktail haze, despite the blacked-out theater, the shuttered panes. Tonight, we're the most tender of soft targets, reclining by the river, pulpy with alcohol and all a sloth. Oh, you who want to slaughter us will be dead soon enough, what's the rush? And this our only world. As you can see, it has a problem. As you can see, the citizens are hanging heavy. The citizens' minds are out. Monsieur, can we get a few more? There are unmistakable signs of trouble, but we have days and days still. Let's be giddy, maybe. Time lights a little fire. We are animal hungry down to our delicate bones. Oh, beautiful habits of living, let me dwell on you a while. It was good getting drunk in the undulant city, whiskey lopping off the day's fear. Dawn came with an element of Xanax. Dusk came and I dumbed myself down. Where there were brides, grooms, now bored boy soldiers with iPhones and guns. I'm a soft target, you're a soft target, and the city has 100,000 softs. The pervious skin, the softness of the face, the wrist inners, the hips, the lips, the tongue, the global body, its infinite permute softnesses. Soft targets, soft readers, drinkers, pedestrians in rain. In the failing light, we walked out into it, and now we share a room with it. Would you like to read to me in the soft? Would you like to enter me in the soft? Would you like a lunch of me in the soft, in its long delirium? The good news is we have each other. The bad news is Kalashnikov assault rifles, a submarine gun, pistols, ammunition, 4 boxes packed with thousands of small steel balls. And so we become ourselves again in the old style, side by side in fragility beside the Pantheon crypt, doing nothing as if for a reason. Shall we now? Shall we? An intake of wine, a discreet folding of hands. We'll lose to gravity, dark and pure, beyond what can be replenished, beyond what can be beyond a plot of nerves gone under. The musk scent of us and filthy pile will be. But we were lustrous from time to time, in a garden, in a city, in a wood melodious with pine. Blur of speech in the gullet, gill of want in the throat. Woke up warm tomorrow in a spot of sun, a flesh, a wild alive, all only. Pausing for 1 second, I'm flipping forward to read from later in the book, where there's some family poems about my grandmother who got her family out of Germany in 1938, and then some poems about my daughter who was born rather recently. Frankfurt, 1938, and Oma was a soft target. Got her soft the fuck out of there. Smuggled out her egg purse to become us, and so it ended, and so it didn't end. If she'd been distracted, if she lived blindly, if she'd been dazed or dullard or out of luck. Kissed her dog goodbye, snuck candy in her pockets, coins in her shoes, ran past the door of her school, her doctor's office, her favorite park, the house where the boy she secretly loved lived. Was made to wade into the night like a swimmer, thought she could not swim. Those Nazis, they knew what to do with us soft. We were just powder puffs, living ones, falling, dandelion fluff. There went my family, there went yours. Epic of soft prolonged in a long fall, an adagio of soft. Meanwhile, waltzing. Meanwhile, chocolate, bread, a lullaby for the cherished Kinder. Her goodnight story, his goodnight kiss. Not me, not mine, not now, she thought, and bore away her family with a winter wind, a vivid mind, with my mother stitched inside her snug and soundly carried safely off through the oceanic effluvium soft across the sea. She sewed a wedding dress, and it too was soft, silk soft. And now we know from soft. Pulse, you know it, and history knows. Over and over it sicks itself upon the soft. Eat, drink, breathe, and kiss your favorite face. Do what you want, and now. Soon laid deep beneath the flimsy weeds will be, and how. The last day is the purest theft. This is my plangent note to the ambassadors of love. All dreaming now is retroactive. The radioactive someday is here. Our king is a crank, a crook, incongruous. He's improper, ill-equipped. How is it we pushed the handle down and he popped out, toasted? And now he sits at the head of our table. Can we be excused? To be female on coronation night was a difficulty. Her skin under his thumb was a sick house, was too much. Our king, no you aren't. Our king, not at all. An X-ray of greed, he moves himself up the flagpole, raising the trees. Comrades, commend yourselves on a job very poorly done. And now what will be? Keep your passport handy. Keep cash, keep water and batteries, collect your meds and loved ones, just in case. There must be some mistake. And the doomsday clock flicks forward, stares us down. Into the sheets we slipped, a crisis affixing us to each other again and again. Well, Los Angeles, well, New York and Paris, give me your men and beds, and I'll come along and purr. Womb was I, turned out. The babies were a transcript of our making, a panorama of life on its back. Thrice I plunked out the humans and hung them to dry until we'd had enough of such extravagant weather and lay there thinking of the bed, how much of life happens there. At the center of everything, this piquant, transitory joy. And from this, even the charred wrecks, even the Dahmers, Nazis, Bin Ladens, all flesh fleshed out of a wild, unmanageable eros. We're always a bit dirty with it. In the birth room, you couldn't think. You were a single moan and tangle. You were in agony, maybe, but also had wings like never before. Welcome to the love bazaar. Let's dip back into it again. Virility. Pheromonal lure of silk slipping off skin. Excessive again, his kiss, her shudder, as snow petals down a lace of white flowers, and our baby sleeps in her indigo crib. Such a reckless act to pop out a human with the jaws of the world set to kill. And she arrived before dawn, staring straight. Her job to eat what exists. Any caress is precious, exaltation in the breathing room, a life force. Who knew our brushstrokes had been so precise, greening darkness with this young vine and this new pain to slow time. Drew more and more from the nub of her until she was herself and emerged ready to live her one life, and she seemed friendly, looking sideways as I swiped her clean. Honey, here are your limbs. We are not too late. Daughter's a soft target. In a fuchsia crush she's come, bare and guileless, fair and free, funneling forward without a helmet toward the barest, sickest tree. Keep them from being head kicked in. Keep their blood inside, intact. Keep them from shooting sprees, from x-rays and bird shit, spiked metal, cruel, sadistic men. Take a self and put her out in the wood for the struggle. Invest in an armature. Mama was a target in her transplant bed, where I found myself praying as the chemicals daisied in, pinpricks, a salvation. The door to the hall was not for her. Walking was not for her. Then breathing was not. Being lifted aloft, that was, and a stretcher and a still bed. A faraway face was she by then, with no further questions, with the difficulty turning on the light. Did she fall soft that last night? And now, afar, afar she went, my soft star. Sybaritic afterlife, I don't crave you. I like daylight. I like crowds. I don't think it will be charming underground. The silence will be sudden, then last. What chic will shrink? There won't be any pretty pity. Will never peaches there or air. Will be so squashed and sour there. I don't want a cold place. Don't want a threadbare clamp and consequence all old. Our loneliness will be prolonged, then go too far. Oh fuck, it's true. Then nothing left of you. Last one. Don't blame the wisteria for setting off a feeling like freedom, a feeling like joy. We watched the people walking in the open square. One of them was a specialist in killing. Fear was the way of others. I've seen the most extraordinary thing about people, their faces. Remember the trees in springtime? We ate candy beneath them. Shouts from the playground, static of yellow jackets, your fresh new haircut. Here's a tweeted canto, some words for the end of the world. For when I'm forever nothing, and you are, and you, and you. What we were for such a brief. Now bring me a souvenir from the desecrated city. Something tender, something that might bloom. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Deborah. It's a little cruel to make us wait till 2019 to be able to read the rest of the collection, but there's nothing we can do. Next up, John Freeman. John Freeman is known as the editor of the anthologies on equality, Tales of Two Cities and Tales of Two Americas, as the former editor of Granta, as the founder of Freeman's, which since John created it 2 years ago, has acted as a launchpad for exciting new talents, as well as a laboratory for established names. As the executive editor of LitHub, as a teacher at the New School, as a writer in residence at New York University, and as the author of 2 books of non-fiction, The Tyranny of Email and How to Read a Novelist. And now it turns out he also writes poetry, which might make you wonder just how many strings does one bow need? Compassionate, witty and precise as a scalpel with language, the poems in Maps, John's first collection, span the vast distances between continents and generations while remaining astonishingly intimate. There's a haiku-like sensibility and depth to poems like Sarajevo or The Heat that steal moments, memories and reflections from time's forward march and hold them up for our consideration, preserving them while also managing, through the strange alchemy of art, not to kill them off or seal them away under aspic. But such is John's range that there are also poems like Tattoo, which manage somehow to be both absurd and profound, and others that confront the injustices of our society, of our world, both past and present, while remaining deeply, doggedly hopeful. As Tracy K. Smith said, Maps is a consolation and a delight. Please welcome John Freeman to Shakespeare & Company.
Thank you, Adam, for that really lovely introduction. It's such a pleasure to read with Deborah, who I think is one of our great poets of intimacy in the body. And it's so exciting to watch as her aesthetic has migrated from intimate personal concerns to the kind of aerated situational violence that I think we all live in right now. And this new book is full of very sharp viewpoints about what it means to be alive, because simultaneousness has never presented so many moral concerns, because you can sit in this beautiful room and listen to poetry while meanwhile terrible things are happening, and the two are not unconnected. That being here is in some ways being engaged. So David and Sylvia, thank you for giving us this church to sit in and not have to pray or kneel. Deborah, thank you for creating this program. It's one of the most warm families with no complications so far. I always get the same amount of dessert. Doesn't have to be weighed, and it's a real pleasure to teach with the poets in this program, who are such an inspiration. Nick Laird and Catherine Barnett and Megan and Matt Rohr are really at the top of their game and are doing exciting things. So I don't have a string in my bow. I'm just trying to keep up with the stream. So in honor of what Deborah just did, I'm going to read a few new poems and then move back into maps. This first poem is soft target related. I'm working on a series of poems set around a park near here. This is called Remember, Forget. I leave the city for 5 days and arrow east into another where psychos dropped shells on people queuing for water and bread. 300 a day for 4 years. My country did nothing. I return and can't enter the park. I walk its perimeter in a rage, joggers and toddlers, lovers' legs entangled. I begin to doubt this reality. What is knowledge 22 years out of date? What is it worth? What would these people do if they couldn't sit beneath a tree, read a newspaper without the fear of being shot? Perhaps memorials always stand in all the wrong places. I think of Jackie Humblat and Marcel Amaru, killed in the first bayonet attack since the Korean War, taking back a bridge from Serbs. Or Eric Hardon, another French peacekeeper, shot in the chest by a sniper while he used a forklift to make safe passage out of a mangled shipping container. If you know how to look, you can watch him die in perpetuity on the web in an AP clip, his eyes glassing over. Are these the new memorials? Today, in Le Monde, 4 women crawled on their bellies from a cellar in Mosul where they'd hid for a month, immediately targeted by snipers. 2 dead. Everywhere the new psychos strangle cities. Still, victory has been declared in Iraq. The headline in the Times says the ceasefire in Syria is being celebrated by the thugs grinning over their power in Hamburg. Already out of date by the time these words are dry. A century from now, perhaps a memorial will stand in a park where people can sit and take their leisure and forget any of it ever happened, only to be shocked again. This is my one Trump poem. It's called Wait. What if each time you caused pain, a small round stone was put in your pocket? Pebbles for inducing self-doubt, osmium for death. Someone hearing you approach, your pockets noisy, they'd know, just like dogs do, to keep a distance. Some would pull wagons behind them, pants disfigured, be shamed from parks, delayed at customs, could never lie flat on the fully flat beds. They'd have to stand, feeling the weight of the pain. This is called Charity. On the steps of Saint-Sulpice, 2 men, 3 women picnic away from the rain. A man in rags behind them sleeping. Before they plate sandwiches, cornichons, fresh pears, crunchy chips. A piece of bread is broken from the loaf, wine poured into a plastic cup, and placed by his body, care taken not to waken him. So these are some poems from maps. I grew up in a really provincial part of Sacramento, California. Shouldn't be here. So any of you who are in the program and you want to one day publish a book, if it can happen to me, I guarantee you can someday be reading poems in Paris. But one of the projects of this book was to try to investigate the privileges, I guess, that I grew up with, living at the heart of the American empire in the most empirical state, California, which was taken from many other people. And the book begins through the aperture of loss, but it allowed me to imagine what I wasn't seeing, what wasn't right in front of me. And some of that was my own family's history. So this is called Legend. My father's father rode the rails west into Grass Valley and buried 3 children in the shadow of a tree that spread its arms around his bakery. Cold nights, he saw stars he didn't believe existed and heard wild animals howling with a loneliness he knew. Wife dead, every morning he woke to the bread and chill, horses snuffling in the dark. He'd starved before, in Canada, winter so ragged it killed the dog, and this grief was that feeling shifted north into his chest. The heart is not a diamond pressed down into something hard like rock, but rather the word my father's father said to himself those 2 cold California nights when all he could see was the work ahead of him, the dead behind. Her name. He'd say her name. This is called The Boy Under the Car. That night in Damascus, her job was to put tea and cake, a sprig of mint on a silver tray, and walk down the crushed pebble drive to the boy paid to sleep under the car. She never said his name or what he looked like, or whether, when she came upon him, curled up, eyes black and glossy, she caught him singing to himself before the clattering metal made him silent. So that is a story my girlfriend told me, leaving Beirut during the Civil War and traveling through Syria. And this is where I grew up. This is called Swap Meet. I used to go to car shows with my dad, and we'd just look at cars. He drove the shittiest cars. And so it was sort of like going to cathedrals of beauty and then getting into a dump truck. But he seemed to appreciate it. Swap Meet. Stingrays black as bats, hoods forked open, flashing piston heads, Lincolns with suicide doors, throat-red interiors, steering wheels spoked like spider webs. We admired the catch, cowl induction scoops spit-ragged clean, Mustangs with cherry-red drive shafts, VWs small and tidy, an unwrapped child's toy. Then home in silence, backs stuck to the vinyl mesh, the glow of beauty polluting the present with an afterwash that should have cast scale to our shabby Chevy with its watered-down V6 and hole in the floor. We stopped at Orange Julius until our backs were dry, a lesson in possession, the sweat drying on my father's beard. This is called Sarajevo. Sarajevo, summer 2016. She pointed. 200 meters. There. I was 15. We were drinking wine outside a bookshop. The shelling lasted all night. The ruby-colored sunset, the river close. The theater so crowded people sat in one another's laps. Bombs fell so near, every few minutes parts of the stage splintered. I'm leaning on a car, cool metal smoked glass. The actors, she tells me, didn't flinch, didn't miss a single line. The audience didn't move, didn't make a sound. You're here, you survived, and you're there, floor shaking, streets buckle, watching a play that for eternity will last. It's called Still Life. From after dark until early morning at the kitchen table, writing patient notes, the radio turned low. Leonard with HIV, whose steroids didn't work. The dying mother of a famous rock star, alone in her Vacaville villa, bemedaled in memorabilia, her son's biggest fan. Meanwhile, her own disease lying in wait. Then, as we slept, it crept to her shoulder, capped her pen, locked her files, and clicked off the music. It's called Mail. We wrote one another a lot in those days, long winding letters that crossed a country, in which I asked if she knew my gratitude. Her replies, so generous it's only now I realize my gratitude wasn't gratitude, but another request. This is called Allowances. I gave myself excuses. This is for my pain, and this, and this. Terrible things. Pain, my pain. All of it so I could get on a train twice a month to witness yours. This is called The Money. The money, he asks. Haven't you thought about the money? We're feeding her applesauce and yogurt. Days later, alone on the East River, I say aloud to myself, I don't have a fucking wallet in my heart to put the fucking money in. This is called The Last. Stars, beat back your kindness. Night, blot the sun. For days we counted her breaths, and then there was only one. Barbers. From the hotel in Martyrs Square, drive east into Ashrafia in search of a barber and learn there are 4 words for barber, 3 of which are spit out, the last of which, coiffeur, anoints a tongue with its mellifluence like the milky coffee served by the small woman from Khartoum who never stops bending and refilling. To sit with a group of men wearing 3-piece suits fingering prayer beads and crosses. To watch a man larger than most giggle his way through a haircut. He has some advice for what one ought to do with sideburns too long. And my beard, it is not good. There are ways to fix this. And these men, who in another time would have had other advice and other things to offer, gather round to officiate as the coiffeur takes a blade to the neck and trims until my head, it is as smooth and perfumed as a past not past, but present. Saudade. Saudade means nostalgia, I'm told, but also nostalgia for what never was. Isn't it the same thing? At a cafe in Rio, flies wreathe my glass. How you would have loved this. The waiter sweating his knit shirt dark. Children loping in tiny suits or long shorts, dragging toys and towels to the beach. We talk, or I talk, and imagine your answer, the heat clouding our view. Here again, grief fashioned in its cruelest translation. My imagined you is all I have left of you. This is called Wimbledon. Walking on the common in heavy blue light, she says to him the time for children, where there ever was one, has passed. That would be that, and 2 close calls aside, she proves to be right. And the years pass with happiness, too great to be measured, because one does not measure what feels endless. Just as this land was once a queen's private hunting estate, everything around it hers, too. There were no boundaries. Until a village grew to service her horses, and part-time tailors, the cobblers and surgeons and cooks needed to properly entertain guests, and then the uninvited came, took what was not desirable, built their limestone houses, rolled carriages down 2-track paths until the dirt was stone, watching the eternal from their hand-blown windows as it tilted through centuries like a faithful planet that doesn't regard its reflection bouncing off distant moons, light traveling back so slowly the world has moved on, its orbit endless, drawn by forces exerting their will in the darkness, which, on this falling January night, has drawn the sky close, like a wool coat, the lights in homes once run by servants, flickering without a wince of post-imperial shame, and South London looks up at wisdom winging down at them like a bat flying on sonar. How nothing remains. That in mere years their love with no one but each other as witness will have found some other way to mark time, not by being boundless, but bound as the sky is to ground at the close of day. I'll read one more poem. This is a new poem. I think the only happy poem. Yay. It's called Love Letter. If you were here, we'd sit outside a while longer, wait until the buzz of scooters stopped and the sky darkened. Then we'd walk home in the tumbling light and eat what remained of it like fresh plums from the windows on Servandoni. Thank you.
Thank you so much, John. So that is it for tonight, or at least for the formal part of the reading. Please do stick around. Please have a glass of wine with us. We have plenty of copies of maps available at the till. We don't have copies of soft targets, but what we do have are plenty of copies of The Uses of the Body. We also have all of John's other books, all of Deborah's other books. So please pass by the till, have a look at what we've got, and come up, and I'm sure they'd be happy to sign them for you. Otherwise, thank you all for coming, and please join me one more time in saying thank you to Deborah Landau and John Freeman.